everybody. Can you all hear me? Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, man in the back. Appreciate that. I am Liz Morton. I'm the field CISO for a company called Axonius. You may have seen us downstairs. We are the awesome orange booth with all the lightsabers hanging from the ceiling. And with me today is my new but soon-to-be best friend.
There we go.
Yes, Rishma Kimji. Rishma has a really awesome job, and we're going to talk about what she does for LAS Airport Systems, which happens to be the system in which Harry Reid International Airport exists. So Rishma is actually in charge of one of the busiest airports in the whole world. Is that fair to say? If you've ever been to Vegas, you've seen her work. So we're going to get to Rishma in just a second. I'm going to run through a little bit of these slides and kind of set us up. We're going to have time for questions at the end, so I think we're going to have a little sign held up so we'll know when to stop so you guys can ask some questions. Fun fact, it is both Rishma and my first time presenting at RSA, so you guys are going to be pretty special to us. Thank you so much. Thanks. It's pretty exciting. So this is a disclaimer. We don't need to worry so much about that. I told you about who I am and who Rishma is, at least primarily. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. So for those of you who are not familiar with Axonius, I'm going to set you up just a little bit, give some context, which you'll find very soon is something Axonius does very well. What we are is a cybersecurity asset management platform. What we do is essentially act as a sort of central repository for all the data that all of your security tools, endpoint management tools, your network management tools, even your HRIS system, all this data that is out there that's being produced while your agents and your other systems are doing their work. We take all of that data and put it together into a common schema. So we normalize the data, deduplicate it, and correlate it, right? So what you end up with is a database of information, truth about your systems, about your environment. It's contextualized. It's pretty powerful. You see this up here. CIA, who remembers the CIA triad, right? We're going, it's kind of a deep cut. I did a little research in preparation for this talk about the origins of CIA, and this is just kind of fun, like fun facts. I like fun facts. It was around 1988 when the whole idea of availability and confidentiality was kind of made a thing, right? People started caring about. Availability up to that point had been kind of a best effort. Maybe it hadn't been much of a concern, really, given most of the computing that was being done at that time. But in 1988, we actually experienced the world's first worm, the Morris worm. Does anybody know about that? I learned about this in my research. It's pretty cool. All right, sir. Good. So with the Morris worm, took systems offline. We started out with this idea of availability, right? Uptime. We care about that. That's an IT principle. That's core to anything you do if you are an IT or an operations person. Confidentiality, not surprisingly, became a concern right around that same time because the US government realized that if you got system data that you weren't supposed to see, that would be a problem. And maybe we should focus on that. So fast forward 10 more years, we have integrity. Shows up with the birth, really, of the assurance function. Do we have any GRC people here? Show of hands. Hold them up there proudly. I'm so glad you guys do the work you do because that is not my monkey. Generally not my area of expertise. But I am so glad that there are GRC professionals there to make sure that there is some assurance, right? Some way of making sure that you are actually performing the activities that you say you're performing as an operational group, there to make sure that policies are actually effectively being applied, et cetera. So that's a fun little group of facts about CIA. Now, here in the modern world, we have a common problem. IT cares a lot about availability still, and cyber people care a lot about confidentiality and integrity. These are not competing concerns, right? Cyber people care about availability as well. And IT people care about confidentiality and integrity. We're professionals, right? But very often what happens is our time slices don't look the same. Cyber doesn't really have operational access, responsibility, et cetera. And yet we do things like run vuln scanners and send tons and tons of tickets to our friends in IT because they have to do the remediation work. So we're asking for a lot of cycles from IT, generally speaking, and IT has their own ideas about how they would like to spend their time, like building new systems, creating more revenue, doing upgrade projects. I mean, think about the millions of things IT personnel do. Throwing a whole bunch of tickets for remediating vulnerabilities, for instance, it's not really a great way to win hearts and minds. So what can we do about that? Ideally, you have a system like Axonius that can help you contextualize your vulnerabilities so that you're able to send things to the IT group that are most impactful to the overall security posture of your organization. It's one of the things that we like to say we do well at Axonius. There we go. Anybody ever been on the receiving end of a slew of completely uncontextualized, no information, vulnerability remediation requests? I have. Kind of sucks. And a lot of the work ends up being manual. Axonius has a wonderful feature. You'll hear us talk about actionability. We have a wonderful feature called our Enforcement Center, where you can build your own workflows, and you can also use any of the 400 pre-built actions that we have made so that you can take the manual work off of the plate of your IT people. So what really matters? I think these are three things that matter for all of us, whether you're an IT person, whether you're a cyber person, an assurance person. Security alignment to the business goal, right, or to business goals. Availability has a lot to do with that, right? If you have a revenue-producing system and it's not there, you're not producing revenue. That's a problem. So IT's kind of got it straight line visibility to at least one element of being aligned with business goals. Cyber, it gets a little trickier, right? We get into things like, risk profile and what matters and where are our crown jewels, what matters to us as a business. One business's threat is another business's everyday, potentially. So having visibility into your environment will allow you to see, depending on what your risk profile is, how effective your program is. Are you actually achieving your goals? Are you lowering your risk profile based on what is most important to you? Information and truth and context matter there. Combating technology sprawl. Anybody ever have an incident pop because you had a server that was decommed that wasn't? I have. Sucks. That in combination with the never-ending need to retain systems from a regulatory perspective, potentially, you end up with legacy stuff. Legacy stuff creates all kinds of non-standard requirements, knowing what you have, where it is, and again, that context is going to help you manage your environment, get rid of your, let's call it sprawl. Sometimes it's just bad decom processes, upstream systems that aren't doing what they're supposed to, automation that has, something broken happens, right? Humans make mistakes. We write automation. Sometimes it doesn't work. That's okay. If you have visibility into your environment, you're going to detect that real quick. Finally, signal-to-noise ratio. I mentioned earlier about vuln management creating a lot of tickets. We have all kinds of great vendors downstairs in the expo hall, right? All of those vendors, maybe except Axonius, are creating data, they're creating alerts, they're detecting anomalies, whatever it is they're doing. They're all creating noise, right? Anybody a defender in here? Active incident responder? Okay, we hate noise, right? Noise is the worst because it causes you to have to stop, pay attention to that noise, figure out if it matters, do something about it potentially. Lowering your signal-noise ratio means you're going to get more information about things that are actually wrong in your environment. So there's a whole body of practice around enhancing alerts using Axonius data, specifically to help give defenders context for the alerts they receive. I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever done incident response, the first question when you see an alert generally is, what the heck is this? So we help with that. But enough about Axonius. I want to talk about my friend Rishma. So Rishma.
Yay.
We're going to the interview portion where I won't talk about vendor things. We're going to talk about how to secure the airport. Rishma, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Rishma Kimji. I'm the Chief Information Technology Officer for the LAS Airport Systems, which includes the Harry Reid International Airport. Many of you know it probably as McCarran Airport. McCarran's the dirty word now. So we don't use that anymore. We are Harry Reid International, and we have 4 sister general aviation airports, so that makes us a system of 5 airports in the Las Vegas area. How many of you have been to the Las Vegas airport? How many of you find that it's easy to travel in and out of? All right, about the same number. That's great. So a little bit about me before we actually get into the airport part of it all. I have 25 years of experience in IT. Started my career off in IBM in New York City, and then transitioned into the public sector in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's pretty much where I grew up and was raised, and I love it there. And moved my way up from working at the Water Authority there to the Albuquerque Police Department, where I was the Director of Technology. And then I moved to Reno. Anybody been to Reno, Nevada? Yeah, it's a great little town. It's the biggest little city, right? I was a CIO there for 5 years and then transitioned to the San Francisco Police Department, so this is another home for me.
Yeah.
And I was a CIO at San Francisco Police, and then I got the opportunity to be the first Chief Information Technology Officer at the Harry Reid Airport, and I jumped on it and I got it, and I'm so happy to be there. So a lot of transition in my career, but it's been a fun and adventurous journey. I've learned so much, and yeah, so now I'm at the airport, and it's year 3 will be next week, so I'm excited about reaching the 3rd year at an airport.
I didn't know that. Good.
And I will say, I go in every day thinking I finally got it, right? After 3 years, you would think you know your organization and the nature of the business and all that stuff. I'll go into my office, just pumped, ready to start the day. Somebody will walk in, tell me about a problem, and I'll be like, oh, I don't know nothing yet. So it is a new and dynamic environment at the airport.
Yeah, great. So let's talk about the airport.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I'm in airports all the time.
Yeah.
But I never really thought about what was going on inside of all those kiosks and with TSA. And, most of the time when I'm in the airport, I just want to get out of the airport, honestly. No offense.
Nope.
So maybe set us up here. Talk to us a little bit about what it's like to manage all of that stuff, what your mix looks like.
Yeah.
I don't know, has anybody else spent a lot of time thinking about the airport? Probably not as much as Rishma.
Yeah.
I'd love to know, what your general operating mix looks like.
Sure.
Yeah.
So our airport is the largest U.S. airport to actually have what we call a common use system. So what that means is that we have a common platform or middleware that the airlines have to sit upon to actually run their business at the airport. There are a couple of other airports in the States that do the same, but we're the largest, and we have been for the past 25 years. The cool thing about it is that we can move airlines at will. And that's why we are a common use airport. We can change gates, we can move airlines. No one airline owns or has a permanent lease at our property. So that means every piece of technology is managed, maintained, innovated, and upgraded and upskilled by my team. And I have a fabulous team. I have a very, very smart and fabulous team. But we're also a very small team.
Right.
And if you think about it, what we do is we move almost 58 million passengers a year through our airport, which means when you get off the curb, right, we call it curb to gate process. So when you come into the airport, you have kiosks, you have agents, you have a bag drop, you have a lot of competing forces, I would say, at the airport to push you through. And so the first part is you either want your bag tag so you can check it, or you want a boarding pass so you have a physical record, or you're going to use your phone, but you've got to meet with the airline to check in, right? And so we try to push you through that process so that our goal is to get you into the post-security area. Now, the one part of the airport that we don't manage are those areas managed by our federal partners, TSA, Homeland Security, Customs and Border Patrol. So when you go through security, TSA manages that space. But anything previous to it, anything post it, is all airport. So in order to make sure that planes are leaving and coming in an orderly fashion, even when there's delays, and I apologize for that, usually it's the airline's fault, not the airport. But when we have those processes in place, it allows for those airlines to push and pull their airports through in a timely fashion, because their nature of the business is to profit and to get as many guests and passengers on their plane flying somewhere, because they make money off the tickets and off the bags. I get it. But we also run the baggage system. So what makes us really cool and unique about the whole thing is that our baggage system is RFID baggage system. So much so that about 15 years ago, I think it was, Delta actually came to us and said, hey, we want to use a similar system. Tell us how you set up the RFID system. Because the nice thing about Vegas is when you check your bag, we can actually follow that bag through all the processes of security until it gets to the bag drop where the airline picks it up. At that point, they scan it, it becomes a part of their property so that they can load it onto the plane. But at least through the airport, we're able to track your bags. And so the nice thing, or the cool thing to think about at the airport, is how many systems it takes for us to push you through the airport so that you can get to your flight. Because once you get to the jet bridge or that walkway onto your plane, you are now the airline's responsibility. You're no longer mine, thank God, because I want to make sure you get to your destination safe and sound. But there are 40 plus systems that we have to use to get you from the curb onto your plane. And those are systems that we have to manage, maintain, and secure.
Wow, I'm exhausted just thinking about that, Rishma.
Yes.
That's a lot
Me
of
too.
complexity. Yeah. You must get up very early in the morning. So within the context of, this discussion, I'm going to ask you some questions about Axonius. I hope that's okay with you guys. You're an Axonius customer.
Yep.
Thank you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming an Axonius customer,
Yep.
maybe some of your what caused you to kind of worry about asset management in general.
Sure.
Asset management, by the way, I think is kind of the unsung hero of cybersecurity, so now you know my position. Rishma, I think you probably are aligned with that. And
Yeah.
then why did you choose Axonius specifically? Like, what did we bring to the table?
Right, so a
that.
couple years ago, the TSA and Homeland Security came out with new mandates on how airports should be securing their environments, their data, because we collect a lot of data, right? From the airlines to the baggage and passenger counts in and out of the airport. But they wanted to make sure that we had a safe and secure environment. As a traveler, when you're coming to an airport, your first thought is, I want to make sure I'm going to a space that is safe, secure, and clean. And what we want to do on the technology side of the world is to make sure that you have that sense of security when you're there. I can't know what to secure unless I know what I have to secure. And so in our journey of looking for a tool that would allow us to inventory all of our assets, because again, we're a common use airport, which means every piece of technology at that airport is owned and managed by my team. And so in order to do that, I have to know what's in my junk drawer. I have to know all the things that are there so that I can then start looking at where do we need to focus our time and attention in securing. And so we picked Axonius because it had a very robust system that could go out into our network and find all of those devices, whether it is a laptop, whether it is a kiosk, anything that's plugged into our network, if it's OT. We were able to then collect all the information on all those tool sets. But on top of that, we could actually even find out the information on those types of devices. If it's an OT device, great. What type of system is it connected to? What kind of data is it pulling from the system? Where is it moving the data to? On our kiosks, hey, we want to know how many kiosks we actually have, right? And then we want to know, are those kiosks being managed and maintained appropriately? Are they getting the right patches? Are there firmwares that we need to put on there? Are there other tools and services that we need to make sure are in alignment with the modern system? And so we have to actually know what we're doing in order to do corrective maintenance. And so Axonius helps us collect all that information and then put it together in a way that me at the top can say, okay, where are we finding gaps? Where do we need to put new policies and procedures? And how can I make sure that the team is buying into all of this data collection and knowing that what they're doing is purposeful and they're actually aligning to the mandates we're getting from the TSA?
Sure, that makes sense. So no end of assurance activities for you with regulators sitting in your airport.
Right,
So
right.
can you comment on how you use Axonius for some of our GRC use cases? We've got some GRC people over here.
Yeah, so what we have done with the help of our fabulous Axonius team, and I want to say thank you to them because they've really made us use this system
Thanks,
more
ma'am.
robustly. There's someone here in the
They're right
crowd.
over there. Yeah.
What we're doing is that we're actually collecting reports and we're able to see, or I'm able to see, and my cybersecurity manager is able to see, where are we efficient and effective in the usage of our tools, whether it is for patches, it is for firmware updates, it is even for our AD accounts. Where do we have administrator accounts? Where do we have those super admin accounts? Where are they being used? How are they being used? What is the east-west movement? What is the north-south movement? So we're able to collect all this data. And then when we're looking at making sure we're managing our mandates properly and that we're collaborating with our insurance company correctly, we're handing them information from this data that we've collected to show that we're making a concerted effort to meet our goals for compliancy. And if we can do that, I don't have to be 100% today in compliance, but I am showing that there is movement to get us to that point where we're 100% compliant, which then eases the burden on the TSA and the insurance companies and Homeland Security and my bosses to know that we have strategic alignment because the data is showing us that we're getting to that point where we say we are 100%, right? Nobody's ever 100%, but it's a goal, and we need to show that increment of us getting there.
Right.
And so it allows us to at least confirm to those that are managing and putting these mandates on us and ensuring us that we're doing the right things. We're safeguarding the data, we're safeguarding our infrastructure, we're safeguarding our applications, our development. Everything has a purpose, and we're showing that compliancy, which then allows us to get the things that we need. Because we all know, right? Nowadays, it's not an issue of if we're going to get hacked, right? It's an issue of when. And resiliency is so important. And I can't build in resiliency into our systems unless I know what systems need to be resilient and where they are in their resiliency journey, right?
Right, so you guys are probably doing some tagging of your key assets so you know what they are. And,
Yep.
yeah, and with that contextual data, it sounds like you guys have a pretty rigorous practice around automated evidence collection where you can actually say to your regulatory parties, we know what we have, it's here, here's the security
Yep.
context in which they operate,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
This is great. And the fact that it can be automated, I don't know if the GRC folks in here would agree with me, but I think one of the most painful parts of the GRC function is evidence collection. It just takes a long time. Maybe it's just because I'm a little short attention span theater sometimes. I lose interest. But I love our ability to automate evidence collection for stuff just like that. So I want to take maybe a little bit of a turn and ask you specifically, because we had a fun conversation about this earlier, about your first use case, the first time Axonius came in and saved the day.
All right.
Go
ahead. So as I mentioned, right, you walk into the airport, there's all these banks of kiosks where you can go and check in and get your bag tags and all that good stuff. And we have them throughout the 2 terminals that we have at the airport, Terminal 1, Terminal 3. And we have hundreds, if not thousands, of these kiosks. And so when we first turned on Axonius and we had it, crawl through the network and find all of our devices, we found kiosks that we had thought were no longer in service. And so that's a really big concern, right? Again, it's like going through the junk drawer and finding that memento that you got from vacation. You're like, oh, that's where that's been, right? And so we're finding these kiosks, and it really allowed us to look at our process for decommissioning kiosks. What does that salvage process look like? What does the decommissioning process look like? We have a great team of airport system techs, but they can't get to everything all the time. And so sometimes things are left because they thought maybe another shift got those devices and pulled them out. And so the nice thing about it is we were able to find all these kiosks. We were able to identify where they were in our airport and then manage the decommissioning of them appropriately so that we can then focus on those kiosks that needed to be in service. And we started looking at what are the policies and processes for those kiosks to be managed and maintained through Exonius.
And without those kiosks, nobody's getting their bags on any plane.
They're not themselves are not getting on the plane.
They're not getting on the
Right?
plane either. That's right.
So-
That's a good point.
So there's an integral part of our business to make sure you guys can get to your destination.
Right, right. So with all this complexity we've talked about, Rishma, I think my favorite quote from Rishma from what we've talked about before was she has a small team, so she needs to make them mighty, which I love because it's true. That's what we always need to do for our people, right? Is make sure we're empowering them to do the best work they can. You have a whole lot of complexity. You also mentioned before about how you have so many players on your field, so to speak. So by that I mean airlines installing their software, you're managing the devices, middleware, et cetera. So with all that going on and a small team, how do you manage your third-party risk?
Oh, wow, that's a really hard question to answer because it's always hard to manage third-party risk, right? They're introducing things into your environment that you don't know if they've quality insured on their end. You hope they have. You put contracts in place to make sure that they are being compliant with their software development or their hardware development processes and policies. But one way to make sure that we're looking at third-party risks is to know what third-party systems, applications, hardware I have within my infrastructure. And Exonius allows us with the inventory collection to look at that, right? If it's a software, it allows us to look at the versioning. It allows us to look at the last time we did some type of firmware or patch update or something like that to it. If it's hardware, OT is a third-party risk for sure, even though it's a low-powered, it's usually a high data output piece of equipment. And we need to make sure that we're understanding what that device is and where it's sending its data and how it's sending its data. So if we don't know what our risks are, then we can't adapt to making sure we have practices in place to cover our butts if something were to ever happen, right?
Cover your assets?
Yeah, there we go. And so that's one thing that we do have to be very concerned about. It can't just be a contractual thing. Yes, we take care of it on the legal side of the world, but we have to make sure that practically we're also understanding what those devices, what that software, what those services are that are embedded in our network, because if we don't understand those third-party risks, then what happened, right? It's happened before, right? SolarWinds was probably one of the first that we can remember. And then CrowdStrike, right? It took down the travel industry for a week, right? Delta is still complaining about systems because of CrowdStrike. And we don't want to be put in a position where we're having to deal with that type of event. And so knowing if we have a particular software or service in our infrastructure, if something were to happen to it, we know right away where it is, and it can hopefully help us identify it, quarantine it, and help with the recovery from it. So it's nice to have something that gives us a dictionary of all the things that we have.
Yeah, and actually you hit on something. We had a little conversation before where Rishma was talking about info sharing within the sort of airport,
Yeah,
is it the airport industry,
community.
airport community. And it occurred to me, mostly because Rishma helped me out because she's an expert, that if one airport is messed up, not great, all the airports suffer. So,
Right.
in fact, it's pretty important that people like Rishma have their eye on the prize, so to speak, because I don't know about y'all, but I hate being stuck at the airport. I get stuck there all the time. Not
But if
at
you do
your
get
airport.
stuck at our airport, we do have some machines that you can slip a 20 in, and
That's right. You
my
can play the
paycheck.
slots at the Vegas airport. That's the one
That
you want
is
to
my
get stuck at.
paycheck. It will make the time go by fast, I promise.
Way to plug your airport. Good job. What's also interesting about Rishma's job is that it's not just the Vegas airport. That's not enough. There's 4 other airports.
Yeah.
So we've got complexity all day long at Harry Reid, and you have a second airport in your 5 that's like the second busiest in Nevada. So you've got 1 and 2.
Yes,
Yeah. So
within our system, yep.
yeah. So from a sort of management perspective, how do those even like remote sites play into your whole overall strategy? Because you're a very
Yes.
strategic thinker, Rishman. I'm about to hit you up about your notions of strategy and how all this fits in.
Well, we all know about the Swiftie effect, right?
Yeah.
We kind of battled that a little bit during the Super Bowl. So we know who went to the Super Bowl last year, right? Not this year, but last year. And it was held in Las Vegas. Our 4 general aviation airports are the non-commercial airports. So basically, this is where the private jets fly in. This is where the flight schools happen. This is where all the crazy people, like maybe myself, maybe yourself, like to jump out of planes. This is where those planes take off, right? And so we have a lot of transactions at those airports that are very financially related. And so PCI is a huge endeavor for us to ensure that we're compliant with. And if any of you have ever dealt with PCI, it is cumbersome. And you have to have the right components in place to ensure that the transactions are compliant with PCI. And so Exonius helps us because we're able to now collect the data from the general aviation airports so that we can understand the flow of data appropriately and where we need to do better segmentation or where we need to put in better tools or where we need to look at for other compliancy issues. And so those general aviation airports are huge business for us at the airport. The North Las Vegas airport is the second busiest airport in Nevada in terms of operations. We had over 200,000 plane operations happen last year, which is huge. I know that probably doesn't make a lot of context for you, but it is a very large turnaround of business at the airport because every time somebody lands at our airport, we charge them a landing fee. And last year at the Super Bowl, Taylor Swift actually put out a tweet that there was no room at the general aviation's airports for her plane to land so she could be here in time for the Super Bowl. And so we had to figure out a way to find her very large jet that came in from LA space.
Well, she didn't want to be late for her date, right? She didn't want to be late. Poor
That was
Taylor.
not a good way for the Harry Reid International Airport to be in the news, so we got hit with the Swiftie effect.
Well, I have it on pretty good authority that Rishma personally solved Miss Swift's issue.
Now, if she could only thank me, right? I'm just kidding.
No, the tweet's coming. So I think we probably have time for one more question for
Yep.
you, and I'm gonna ask you to just riff a little bit on your, like, as a leader, how you use contextualized data about your environment at kind of a higher level, a strategic level. You, I thought, very eloquently said to me that your goals as a security leader are to elevate the overall security profile of your entities,
Yep.
right? So all 4 individually and then the whole
here,
group
mhm.
together. So would you tell this wonderful group of people a little bit about how you conduct your strategy?
Yeah, so it's really two ways. The first way is to collect the data, understand where are our gaps. Again, if you don't know your environment, you're never going to be able to fix it. And so knowing what you have in your environment gives you a leg up in that security profile because you're learning, you're moving towards maturity in your cybersecurity analysis and management. And so by knowing what we have in our environment, I'm able to get our teams to understand where they need to focus their attention on. We can either use automation tools to help fix some of those gaps, which is great because then the team has the time to deal with the critical issues, or it allows them to revisit their processes and policies to say, are we doing the right thing at the right time? We're always doing the right thing if you have security in mind, right? But are we doing it the right time? Are we doing it the right frequency? Are we doing it the right way to ensure that we're elevating and maturing our
With the right
cybersecurity
priority,
profile?
too. I mean,
Yep.
prioritization is sometimes the name of the game. right?
Correct.
Yeah.
We have to prioritize that. On the other side of the world, I have to use that data to show my boss and the CFO that we are actually applying the right measures at the right place and the right time so that when I go to my CFO and say, I need X number of dollars because we need to modernize this tool set or we need to put in some new hardware here or I need to look at a new technology stack, I can't do that unless I have the right data in place and I'm showing incremental movement towards our strategy and goals. So when we're looking at something 3 to 5 years out, I know where we need to go with our modernization activities at the airport. Legacy is a huge problem, right? And in the government sector, sometimes all we live in is the legacy world. But I've got to find ways to make that legacy not so legacy, right? And the only way to do that is to understand where those systems live. I remember in a previous job walking in and they said, oh, we have this old system and we just make sure that the servers are running. We don't know who uses it. We don't know what it's used for. We just make sure it's up and running. Well, we had a power bump. It took that server down and 90% of our users complained. We didn't realize that the reach was that far. And if you don't understand that, if you don't know what's in your environment and the impact it has, you're never going to be able to build resiliency in your systems. And then you're never going to be able to fund that resiliency because you can't prove to the world and to your bosses and to the guy with the money that you need the funding available to make that resiliency true.
Yes.
And so it's helped us to really strategize where we want to go in the next 3 to 5 years. It's helped me look holistically at the systems, develop the priorities, put in the right measures so that we can then move to the next level of modernization in our technology.
Yeah, and I think when we talked earlier, you hit on how it's hard to hire. Anybody else
Yeah.
have that problem? Hard to hire? Yeah.
Hard to hire for me, it's always hard to hire.
Easy to justify expenditures when you have, data and plans and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Hard to hire. So one of the nice things about Axonius, one of the ways I used it when I was a customer, and Rishma, I think you guys are launching this program, is the actual actionability piece, right?
Yeah.
So the enforcement center I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, actually taking that data and doing all the automation that you have to have if you're going to run something as crazy big as what Rishma's doing with a team of not very many people, never enough people, right? So you've got to get your automation game on, and you talked a little bit about that too.
Yeah, and it lets you know that the automation is working, right? Because you can
Yes.
see the improvement in your numbers. Because a lot of times we'll put in the automation and then just be like, okay, I put it in, I'm going to ignore it because I'm going to assume it's working. But this actually allows you to see the progress of that automation.
Yes.
And automation is not just one and done. There is a process where you have to reevaluate that automated service, right? You have to make sure that it is running and that it is running appropriately based on what you have in your infrastructure.
I agree. Continuous improvement is the name of the game.
Yes.
Thank you, Rishma. I'm going to go to apply what we have learned today. RSA is very into you guys walking away with something that is actionable. I love actionability, so that's fine. So I think we've talked a bunch today about how having visibility into your environment for real will allow you to actually understand the real risks that are associated with your current state and give you a map to get to a much better place. Proactive security, one of my favorite things, is a person who has an extensive background in IT and operations as well as cyber. I can tell you I really do like the idea of using some of the horsepower of the IT and operations group to achieve better security. There are, frankly, more of them often than there are defenders. Seems like if we used the full capabilities of our practices using a tool like Axonius, which I like to think is a bit of a unifier, you might just find that you're far more effective with your small but mighty team, just like Rishma. And then, this little item here about vulnerabilities. Vulnerability management is a big thing. It's kind of the white whale in most shops that I've worked in because it's cumbersome, tedious, takes a lot of time, kind of angers people in its own way. There's another way to do it. Axonius just released a really great tool set that rides on top of our platform called Exposures. And if I had another 50 minutes, I would talk to you about Exposures because that's how good it is. But generally, you can come to our booth, S626, so S for South, this building, downstairs. Again, hard to miss, lightsabers on the ceiling, big orange booth, lots of friendly people. We'd love to show you about our tool, and I think we are at this point ready for Q&A. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. Okay,
So the question was, how many people do we have in IT, and then how many people do we have in cybersecurity at the airport? So in total, we have a team of 100 and plus people. That might seem like it's a large amount, but when you start looking at the teams that we have in there, right, our cybersecurity team is 5 people strong. But then I also have an airport services team, which is 20-some people strong, but they work all 3 shifts. So I have a day, swing, and grave shift because the airport's 24/7. So I have very small teams that are concentrated doing the type of work that they have to make sure that the airport is functional. But my cyber team is 5 strong. They're 5 amazing, fabulous people. My cybersecurity manager, I'm so proud of him. We actually stole him from an airline. So he has the perspective of what it means to keep data safe and the opportunity to make sure passengers and guests have an optimal experience at the airports and with the airline. So having that background has helped us really look at what we're doing to make sure we're, one, managing and maintaining our cybersecurity profile. He understands the relationship between the federal partners, and his team has done a really great job of ensuring that we have our Exonius system running and fine-tuned and bringing us these amazing dashboards. But one of the things I told my team was, we're not buying any new tools this year. I need you to focus on the tools that we've already purchased and expanding the usage of them, because we need to be robust. We can't just buy 100 tools and assume we're only going to use 10% of those tools, right? We've got to use the depth and breadth of these tools, because that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck.
It's all about the money.
I hope that answered your question.
Oh, then the money comes. Yeah.
Right. Right. So the question, just for the audience, is how do we convince our executives, or the ones handing us the money, that vulnerability management is a proactive tool, not a reactive tool, right? And for us, what makes it easy for us is because we do have those federal agencies on site that they audit us, and we're paying for insurance, right? That if I can show that we are being progressive with our vulnerability management, and I need the monies to be more progressive, then we're not going to get dinged by these agencies, right? So use whatever data governance is part of your industry, use that as part of your story, because you have to be compliant with those, because sometimes the fines are really high, and I don't want the airport to get shut down because we're not being proactive with our mandates. On the other hand, what we're showing is that one thing that people don't really realize, that ROI is not just a return on your investment dollar-wise, it's actually reputation. And if I can make sure that we're never on the front page of the paper because we had a data breach, that alone ensures the general public that uses our facility that they're walking into a safe place. So reputation is also very expensive to recover when it is broken. And so I use that storytelling with our CEO and our CFO, that yes, you're giving me extra money to make sure that we have vulnerability management in place, that I understand our asset infrastructure, I understand where we're at with all of the things that we have in our infrastructure. But I'm also telling the story that if we want to ensure that we have safe, secure, and clean operations and facilities, we've got to put some money into it. There's competing interests all the time. So you just have to make the case of what is the reputation worth as well.
And I think there's a strategic point too when you start talking about proactivity, right? It's kind of a mindset. We have an industry in the cyber industry that I think is kind of going through some metamorphosis, right? It's been a very tools-oriented, defender-first kind of approach to cyber is a very general way of talking about it. And I think what we've reached the point, kind of a fever pitch, where being reactive it's not profitable. It's not going to help you. You can't have, I had a pretty big team in my previous employer where I was an excellent customer, and those 32 people were not, I have 32 defenders. How lucky was I? Those 32 defenders were still not enough to address every single problem. The other 600 or 700 people that worked in IT and operations, and the rest of us in the security, engineering, and architecture groups, there were more of us, right? If you're proactive, you say, okay, I'm going to actually make it a point to look at what the reality of my environment is. Your point about vulnerability management being a proactive activity, yeah, it's much better if you find the vulnerability first, right? It's all about keeping the activity off of your off of your defenders because there just frankly aren't enough of them. But it is a mindset, very much. And reputational risk, definitely a thing for every company. Some people have more visible entities than others,
Yeah.
which is why Rishma has sponsored a permanent parking spot for Taylor Swift's jet, so we never have a bad tweet about the airport again. But reputational, I worked for a company that had, basically 24/7 presence on television. If anything happened at all that even looked like a problem, it was all over the news.
Yep.
It's a lot of pressure. I like pressure. I like good pressure. Good pressure is like, let's keep at it. Let's keep fixing this. Look, we have this problem. Let's fix it. Let's avoid. Problem avoidance, my favorite way of solving problems. Just never have them. Any other questions? Folks, you've been wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you,
Thank you,
Rishma. You are the best. Really appreciate you guys hanging out. Thank you. And again, come see us at the booth downstairs. Can't miss us.